Hi, this is Kim Cook again at Bread of Life Mission, and we are here having conversations on a bench. We're going to be sitting outside for 24 hours talking to people about homelessness. And really quickly, I want to thank Conan Steiner here in Pioneer Square, who provided our lunch for us today for the whole crew. So thank you, Conan Steiner. Now, I would like to introduce Steve Buri from Discovery Institute. And Steve, thank you for coming down and sitting with us.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and kudos to you for doing this. And we were commenting here before that you got some sunny weather. It's a little chilly, but the sunshine is nice.
Yeah, actually, there's 14 other missions that are doing this across the country, and there are people in Georgia and Florida, South Carolina that thought it would be a lot of fun to do this, and they just got like whomped.
Yeah. At least we're not in 10 inches of snow.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be in Seattle today.
Yeah.
So, Steve, can you tell us a little bit more about Discovery Institute and what you guys do?
Yeah, thank you. And before I do that, I was going to point out that, we first met, we work just a few blocks apart, but we first met in Washington, D.C. at the Citygate event.
Are you going to be there this year?
Possibly, yeah. But kind of a funny story that we met clear across the country, and we're just a few blocks apart here in Seattle. Discovery Institute is a 30-plus-year-old, nearly 35-year-old think tank. So it started as kind of a policy research organization representing Pacific Northwest interests nationally. So some of the well-known think tanks nationally, Brookings Institute, Heritage Foundation, Cato. Discovery was like a Seattle version of that, representing national issues. So we have, over the years, become really interested in questions around what it means to be human, human uniqueness. We celebrate human achievement, entrepreneurship, and we advocate for policies that advance those ideals. And we first got involved in the issue of homelessness in 2018 when our founder, Bruce Chapman, commissioned a report on Seattle's homeless crisis because he saw that something was driving it in new ways, was making it explode, and also that what we were doing or what policymakers were doing wasn't really effective. We were spending more and more money pursuing policy objectives that have not really proven to be very effective. And so for us, in this particular issue, and the issue where you're really a frontline worker, which again I applaud, is making sure that what we're doing is toward compassionate outcomes and helping people experiencing homelessness reach recovery and helping them realize their full God-given potential.
Exactly.
And that should be the metric, I think, by which we measure our success. Yeah.
Exactly. Some people think that putting people into a place to live and no wraparound services is actually doing just that. Why is that not the case?
Well, we've released a report that builds on some data that we've developed here in Seattle, and I think nationally. I think the metric that you need to look at is anyone studying this issue is that 10 years ago, federal policy, which is where nearly 70% of the dollars flow from the federal government, went all in on, housing first, and that is housing first without any wraparound services, without any requirement for treatment or recovery. And we've pursued this for a decade now, and in 2013, not a partisan issue, everyone wants to, I think, sincerely solve the problem, but 10 years ago, the administration said we're going to end homelessness in 10 years. That was 2013. 2023, we have not ended homelessness. It's become an acute crisis and really affecting communities throughout the country. But particularly communities, I think, that have doubled down on kind of the housing first, which in effect is housing only, right? It's and studies show that people die in higher numbers if there are no rules and you're providing housing and they're unsupervised. And again, if the goal is compassionate outcomes, this is not a compassionate approach. And it tends to be the most expensive and least effective. So I think that's why it's not working. The other part of it, though, is the important work that you do, Kim, and that other missions do around the country. that's really vital is building relationship with people. It's very hard for government agencies to provide the kind of service that missions provide, that speak into getting to know the person as a fellow human being, investing in their life, investing in their success and recovery. And it's very hard for government to do that, whereas nonprofits like Bread of Life Mission and others, it's driven first with the heart and with the goal of restoration and recovery. And I think that's really important. Yeah.
So many of our guys are just so thankful for that accountability that they get. And, you know, they say sometimes that the best thing that ever happened to them was going to jail.
I was about to say that. And my colleague Caitlin McKinney, who I know you're going to be interviewing, I think tomorrow, she's examined this and interviewed people. Jenny Burton, the most famous example of someone who was in acute addiction, and she was sent to jail, and she herself says, you know, I would not be alive today if I hadn't been sent to jail. So for a lot of people, that's a wake-up call, and it's a point of rock bottom where they realize that they need help, they need to turn their life around, and we need more services, missions, both in the public and private sector, services to help people with addiction and mental health, because I think those are the real drivers of the crisis.
Yeah, I think you're right that, you know, when I first came here, I would see people on the street and I go, I don't know if that's mental illness or addiction. And then I'm starting to realize it's almost more addiction. But if we could just get a handle on those, homelessness would go so, you know, down so quickly.
Yeah.
But again, it's treating the whole person. We need to treat people's mental illness
and they're really intertwined, because severe addiction can lead to mental health problems, and severe addiction makes someone, you know, generally unemployable. They're on the street. That's not good for one's mental health. It's a cascading set of issues, often beginning with you know, addiction, but exacerbated by external factors that kind of snowball, and it results in the kind of crisis we see on the streets around us.
Exactly.
I do feel like we're making a lot of progress on two issues that I think have been drivers. So the housing first approach, and I know there are different views here in Seattle about that particular issue, but also harm reduction. You know, government over the last, it began with needle exchanges, which you can kind of rationalize. You can imagine how, as a means of preventing disease, maybe giving people clean needles might make sense. But we've gotten to a point where in the harm reduction space, we're handing out foil, which is used in fentanyl. Like, how is handing out foil a health benefit?
Right.
It's not. And so again, these are, I've spent my career in the policy world. I tend to view things through a policy lens, and I guess I think it doesn't have to be this way. Like there are different approaches. We know what works, and what works best is people and organizations that invest in the lives of people and get to know them and their families. And I've been in missions before where someone walks in the door and the person at the door of the mission knows their name, knows their story, and that gives value to that person and makes them want to get better. And so I think we need more funds for treatment and recovery, more wraparound services, more required services. And I think this is not an intractable problem. We can solve this problem, but we need a new approach.
Right. Yeah. Can you explain to people about Housing First and how that it doesn't cover like somebody like us? Like we can't get money from Housing First right now. Yeah,
and my understanding is that it's you know, if, and I have to say I'm not an expert on this particular point, but for private groups that have a faith orientation, a lot of times they won't qualify for services. I do think that there are, and for a long time that was really a arm's length relationship kind of problem where ironically, the groups doing the best work with the most effective statistical outcomes were kind of given an arm's length relationship on the basis that they didn't qualify because they required treatment. Or they required, I think there's a myth that people are required to participate in faith services and that sort of thing.
Right.
No, but you have to submit. You can't take drugs here. You can't be in
Right.
active addiction. You have to be seeking recovery. And again, those are the outcomes that actually work. We know that empirically. And so I think, however, what's changing is not necessarily that problem, which I think maybe a new approach in Washington may open the door to those sorts of changes. But certainly there is a warming here in Seattle on the part of policymakers to partner with organizations that for too long have, like Bread of Life, like the Union Gospel Mission, and others who have not been considered somehow community partners. And maybe I'm overstating that. I mean, you would know better than me, but I feel like that there is a real change there that's palpable and that I think is really positive.
Yeah, since I got here a year and a half ago, I've really sensed that people are open to new ideas
Yeah.
and partnering with us. I don't think it was that way before, but being new, I don't know.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So you came out with a report in the last year, and there's some really great data in that report.
Yeah.
I meant to have it with me, and I forgot.
No, that's fine.
But one of the data points in that was what will happen in America and in Seattle
Yeah.
if nothing changes.
Yeah, and that's really troubling, and that's why we do need to change course. And I think why we're beginning to win on this issue, if winning is that, hey, what we're doing is not working, we need a new approach. Homelessness in the last count, which was just released at the end of last year, I believe if my figures are right, homelessness increased 12% nationally. Meanwhile, here in Seattle, it's significantly worse. And so if you extrapolate that out looking forward, I mean, in the next 2 to 3 years, the crisis here, which is already very severe, will double. And the other issue that we're finding in certain cities, and our data is centered around the city of Seattle, but just under half of the people who are experiencing homelessness here in Seattle did not start out homelessness here. They've come here for a variety of reasons. One, as a reputation for free services. I was talking before about kind of the health department's approach on harm reduction, free paraphernalia, these sorts of things, ready access to services that, again, with no treatment requirement, which is a federal policy, but also adopted by a lot of folks here. I think the new approach will center around required treatment and recovery, and maybe a repurposing of funding to those types of services. I would say permanent supportive housing has a place, but if you look at the numbers, we've gone all in on that particular approach, and we're not providing enough temporary shelter beds and other means of kind of a point of entry for people who want to get back on track.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we have a graphic we're going to put up at some point, but it talks about the difference between emergency, like when there's a disaster relief, and there's 4 different levels, and I've completely forgotten them. But you know, an emergency shelter is like that acute, get them off the street, right? And then all the way down to like the life transformation and community development, which is what we do in our program. And I think we've just skipped some steps, right? And we're in crisis. We have to go back to putting some money behind this emergency. Get them off the street. And what do you do in war? You know, or in an emergency room, you triage. Right. And so I think we've got to get them off the street, and then figure out what is it going to take. And sometimes it's getting them back home. And maybe to a mission near home.
That's a big part of it, and that's part of our research too, is that people recover in much higher numbers when they have a support network. And if you're not from this area and you're experiencing homelessness, addiction, mental health crisis, and you want to get better, you're not really poised for recovery in a place where you don't have people who care about you, love you, and who you can rely upon. And so part of what we're looking at is how can we reunite families, how can we create a support network for people, and I think that's another huge part of it.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean giving them a bus ticket and saying see you later, but it means just really helping people reconnect with the healthy people in their life.
Active case management is key. And you mentioned earlier, that for 10 years this has been called a crisis, and it is a crisis, but when you look at, for instance, FEMA responses in a crisis, there are emergency shelters created. There's a support network for people that's immediately available after a hurricane or earthquake or fires or whatever. And we say that this is an emergency, but we don't treat it in the same way. And I think we need to. I think we don't need apartments for people. We need temporary shelter. We need to give them a place to begin a path to recovery. And, I think the other thing I've found in working on this issue over the last several years is how much agreement there is on this particular point. So myself and members of our organization give talks in front of diverse audiences, politically diverse, and when I talk about it as a crisis driven by addiction and mental health and not primarily about housing affordability, everyone nods their head. Everyone seems to know from their own experience passing people on the streets that this is about more than just this person can't afford a house. So again, prioritizing emergency support services around those things, and I really do sense a change there, and a really positive change, and across even the political spectrum, because certainly people understand this crisis for what it is and see that we need a change of course.
Exactly. So just to go back to the thing that really hit me in your report, and correct me if I got this wrong, but I believe that it said that if nothing changes, homelessness will double in the next 3 to 5 years in America. But in Seattle, it will double in 3 years or less.
Correct. Yep. And that's why what we're proposing, and we have, I think, really the best team in the country on these issues. Robert Marbut is a leading figure, probably one of the best known figures in the country on approaches that work. He started Haven for Hope in San Antonio, which is one of the country's leading facilities for restoration and recovery in treating homelessness. We had Billy Baldwin out, the Hollywood actor, and Billy is, I've become acquainted with him, and there's a lot we don't agree on, but we agree on this particular issue, and so Billy's been kind of a well-known voice joining us in this effort. Caitlin McKinney, I know you're meeting with Jonathan Cho, who's covered kind of the grittier aspect of this, and it's not always fun to watch or pleasant to watch of what's happening on the streets. And certainly also there are attendant issues with homelessness and people who are in desperate situations who resort to theft from businesses and other things to survive. And as a Christian, how do we get to that point? We need to be helping people on a path to recovery, and again, I'm really hopeful looking forward that we can avoid that worst case scenario highlighted in our report. It's going to take some political will, community will, and certainly partnership with groups like Bread of Life.
I've really tried to stress the point that it's not any one person, government, organization that's going to fix this. It's too big. Right? We all have to come to the table, and we all have different ways of looking at the problem and helping with the problem. But if we can all I'll do that and come around the table,
Yeah.
then we can make a difference in this.
Yeah. I
It
absolutely agree.
10 years ago, 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
numbers were going down,
Yeah.
right? We can get back there,
We
but we
can
have
get
to do
back
it
there.
now.
Yeah.
Now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
So tell me if I can,
yeah.
not to
Yeah,
turn the
you ask
interview
me some
around, but
questions. Yeah.
tell me what you're seeing on the streets of Seattle. Certainly there is a new approach, I would say. It has been a marked change in kind of visible homelessness, but then I know there are debates around moving people around, and I know Robert Marbut, our lead guy, would say, you can address the problem in one place and it will move to another place. And so what are you finding at Bread of Life? And obviously, do you have enough beds to accommodate people? And what are you seeing?
Well, we have 40 emergency beds, and
Mm-hmm.
people can come in under the influence
Mm-hmm.
for 30 days.
Yeah.
And that we have a line out the door every night. So when
Mm-hmm.
you're watching later,
Yeah.
there will be a line down the
Mm-hmm.
sidewalk waiting to get in, and we can't take everybody
Yeah.
that comes.
Mm-hmm.
We have 110 beds upstairs,
Mm-hmm.
and those are pretty much full.
Yeah.
Those are recovery beds, like the program, working
Yeah.
through it. But it takes a long time. It takes a lot of staff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it, our program is probably 9 to 12 months on average, but somebody who needs help with schooling or some extra thing, it could be 2 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if we put them out at the end of a year and they go right back to where they started, we've just done it for nothing.
Yeah.
So I want to walk with them until they're really ready.
Yeah.
That said, yeah, we could easily double our beds and still not have enough.
Mm-hmm.
I really, and Robert told me, and I don't know if this is in your report, but he said that 39% of the homeless numbers in Seattle are women, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That is new. Like, it used to be older men, and now it's all ages, and a high number of women. And it just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
When I came here, the board said, these are homeless men. It's kind of rough. Are you good? And I'm like, yeah. I don't want to work with women because they come with so much baggage.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But I'm walking around Pioneer Square and I'm seeing these women on the sidewalk at night.
Yeah.
And they must be just experiencing trauma after trauma beyond that. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah. And in those cases, it is trauma. And I've been out with Jonathan covering encampments and that sort of thing. And there's almost certainly trafficking that's part of this problem of women. Are you finding in those cases? Well, I'll back up. I'll say, what we think are the real drivers of the crisis, not housing affordability, but again, addiction, mental health. And then the other one is broken relationships. And that's why the missions are so important, because they build relationship with people. But those broken relationships can be domestic situations, runaway kids. For the women that you're talking about, are you seeing that it is driven primarily by addiction, by domestic situations, by runaways? Why is that growth happening so much?
I'm not sure in Seattle. I suspect that a lot of it is that broken relationships.
Yeah.
Women have a choice, usually, quite often. They can be on the street or they can be in a relationship with somebody who's taking advantage of them in some way. And a lot of them choose to be in that relationship because at least it's the known, right? But a lot of them are out on the streets, and I see a lot of mental illness out here.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a big driver of it. But then there's addiction too. So, until we have some shelters that really are giving women time and helping them move along and find life change, I don't think we're really going to know because they're just out there.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely a huge problem. And I just wish that I could open the doors and let them all in and help them all, and we can't.
Well, again, Citygate, the missions that are out there, the faith aspect, the giving people a sense of hope and purpose and value that's why missions succeed where other programs don't. And so many people are desperate to recover. There are a certain number of people, and I'm sure you run into this, who want to be out on the street because they can set their own rules. They're not ready to submit to kind of the rules of society or whatever drives it. But I have to think, as I look around and see people suffering on the streets, most of those people, they want out of it. They don't want to be there, but they're trapped in their addiction. And a few years ago, there was the documentary on Como TV, Seattle is Dying. And one thing I learned through that is I was talking about how the homeless crisis, mental health crisis has not been properly addressed, and it's getting worse and worse. And why is that? And kind of examined the roots of that. But I've often driven by the encampments when they're at their worst, and they're not healthy. There's disease, there's trash, there's lots of opportunities to get sick or injured.
Right.
I thought, God forbid, if I were ever homeless, I wouldn't live like that. But then the realization I had watching that documentary is people in active addiction, mental health crisis, they don't really see the squalor around them. They're looking for their next fix because they're trying to drown it out in a sense. And so, I guess the point I'm making is we need to, again, focus on kind of the recovery aspect of drug treatment. No, these people suffering, what we're doing is not compassion, and they really want to get better, but it's incredibly hard. And you, in one sense, you have to want to get better.
Right.
In another sense, someone loving that person is a first step to them having a self-worth where they want to get better.
That is so true. So many of the people that come in through our door have lost all hope and all belief in themselves.
Yeah.
And they need somebody else to believe in them for a little while. And maybe for a long time.
Yeah. Right.
I heard once that it takes 5 years to go from homelessness to really being self-sustainable.
Yeah.
And it's like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And they might be looking great, and we're so proud of them, and they're and then they fall.
Yeah.
And if we just go, well, you've used up your last chance. Well, we might be stopping one time too soon.
Yeah, that's right.
And so grace is one of our core values here. And I just know that I've messed up so much in my life. And
we all have.
Yes, we all have. But somehow we look at somebody with a different problem and we judge them.
Yeah.
And instead I go, I've messed up and people had grace for me.
Yeah.
So why can't I give them grace? I just need to put myself in that position and go, I don't know how I would do it.
Yeah.
So let's give them grace. That doesn't mean no boundaries, right? It doesn't mean no accountability. It's just grace.
Yeah.
And seeing them as a human being is the start of that. Yeah.
Well, for many, you get them on a path of self-sufficiency. And for us at Discovery Institute, we think the measure, which for years now, the measure has been how many housing vouchers we're handing out, right? That's how we measure our effectiveness, but it's not a very effective measure in helping a person realize their full potential.
Right.
The most effective measure is how many of them, as you were just describing, Kim, come to a place of self-sufficiency. And they're a contributing member of society, which is what we should want for everyone. And so by that metric, we've been failing. But again, it's the mission organizations that are doing the on-the-ground work that are churning out changed lives. I see it time and time again, and it's incredibly important. Really a champion, passionate about what you do, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for what you do.
Yeah, of course.
I've had a lot of support from your organization since I got here. So glad to have friends there.
Yeah.
What's one thing, we've got like less than a minute.
Okay.
One thing that you would still want to say to people who are watching, and how can they find you guys? To get more information?
our particular work on this issue is at fixhomelessness.org. It's really a repository for writing on housing issues, on addiction recovery, and our Seattle plan is there. So fixhomelessness.org. The one thing that I think we need to do is to reorient funding, government funding in particular, to treatment and recovery services and temporary shelter beds. I think you would see a dramatic shift. It would go back to what you were saying, that years ago we actually had a declining homeless population. I think reorienting funding away from permanent housing and towards transitional housing, temporary shelter beds and recovery services, dramatic shift. If I could do that here in the city of Seattle with leadership, I think that's how you're going to see a change. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you,
and
Kim.
I'll look forward to seeing Caitlin tomorrow. And Jonathan will be here in the morning,
Yeah.
I think it's 7:30.
Yeah.